When my daughter-in-law told me to give up my room for her parents, or find somewhere else to sleep, I didn't say a word. I picked up my coffee cup, set it down on the coaster, folded my napkin beside my plate, and excused myself from the table. 2 weeks later, I was sitting at a desk in the house, directly across the street, watching her pour cereal in her kitchen every morning. That was only the beginning. Before we go on, please subscribe to Cold Vengeance and leave a comment telling me what province or city you're watching from tonight. I read every single one. The dinner had started the way dinners at my son's house always started, with the television on in the background, and my daughter-in-law moving between the stove and the counter with the focused energy of someone performing rather than cooking. I'd arrived at 5:30, the same time I always did on Thursdays, hung my coat on the hook by the garage door, and taken my usual seat at the kitchen table. My son was already there, scrolling through his phone with his elbows on the table, barely glancing up when I sat down. We exchanged the kind of greeting men exchange when they've run out of easy things to say to each other. I'd been living in their basement for 14 months by then. Not the finished kind of basement you see in the real estate listings, the ones with pot lighting and engineered hardwood and a wet bar. This was a proper bedroom they'd converted from the laundry room side, functional enough, with a window that looked out at the neighbor's fence, and a bathroom I shared with their dog's grooming supplies. I'd moved in after my wife passed, after our home in Burlington sold in 4 days for more than we'd ever imagined possible when we bought it in 1989. My son had suggested the arrangement. Just until you figure out your next chapter, Dad. I hadn't pressed for a timeline. That was my first mistake. My daughter-in-law was 20 minutes into cooking when the front door opened. I heard voices in the hallway, 2 of them, familiar in their particular way, the overlapping rhythm of a couple who finish each other's sentences, whether the other wants them to or not. Her parents came through to the kitchen carrying the kind of bags you bring when you're planning to stay. Not overnight bags, the kind with the telescoping handles. "Well, we finally made it," her father announced to no one in particular. He set a bag down directly in front of the refrigerator and spread his arms out like a man surveying property he already owns. Her mother was hugging my daughter-in-law with both arms, rocking slightly, talking about the drive from Barrie like she'd crossed a mountain range. I caught my son's eye across the table. He looked back at his phone. We ate. Her father talked about his golf game, about a disagreement with their condo board, about a show they'd been watching. Her mother contributed affirmations and elaborations. My daughter-in-law laughed and refilled their glasses first. My son ate quietly. I ate quietly. Neither of us was asked about our weeks. It was after the plates were cleared that my daughter-in-law turned to me directly. She stood at the island with her arms crossed, which I had come to understand was her posture for announcements rather than conversations. "Gerald," she said, "we've been thinking. Mom and Dad need somewhere comfortable to stay for a bit. The condo situation is complicated, and it could take a few months to sort out. Your room downstairs would really work for them. It has its own bathroom and everything." I put my coffee cup down. "The room downstairs? My room?" My son was looking at the table. "I'd like to understand what you're suggesting," I said. My voice was even. I'd spent 38 years as a civil engineer managing contractors, inspectors, municipal planners, and the occasional city councilor who thought concrete specifications were a matter of opinion. I knew how to keep my voice even. She unfolded her arms just enough to gesture toward the basement door. "You could stay in a hotel for a while, or look at some of those senior communities. There are actually really nice ones. We could help you look." Her father was nodding from the kitchen table. "Practical solution," he said. Her mother smiled at me with the particular sympathy of someone who has already decided for you. I turned to my son. His jaw was tight. He was staring at a spot somewhere between the fruit bowl and the salt shaker. "Nathan." I said his name quietly. He cleared his throat. "Maybe we could all just... There might be another way to..." My daughter-in-law stepped forward. "Nathan, we talked about this." She looked at me. "We're not trying to be unkind, Gerald. We just need to think about what works for the family." The family. I turned that word over once. Then I stood, pushed my chair in, thanked them for dinner, and walked to the basement stairs. I packed the way I've always packed, methodically. 38 years in civil engineering meant I understood the value of systems. I folded each shirt flat, rolled my socks, wrapped my razor in a flannel cloth, tucked my medication into the side pocket of my shaving bag, exactly where it belonged. On top of everything else, I laid the framed photograph of my wife taken at Long Point in the summer of 2009. She was laughing at something off camera, shielding her eyes from the sun with one hand. I'd always loved that photograph because she looked completely free in it. From upstairs I could hear them. Her father was already asking whether the basement got good Wi-Fi. Her mother was saying something about bringing her own pillow. My daughter-in-law was saying, "Of course, of course." I zipped the suitcase closed. My son appeared at the bottom of the stairs as I was pulling it toward the door. He looked like a man who'd meant to intervene 20 minutes ago and kept finding reasons not to. "Dad," he stopped. "You don't have to leave tonight." I looked at him for a moment. I looked at my son. This man I'd taught to ride a bicycle in a school parking lot on a Saturday morning, who I'd driven to hockey practice in -20 weather before the sun was up, who I'd sat beside in a hospital waiting room 3 years ago while the doctors explained what was happening to his mother. "I'll be fine," I said. "I'll get myself sorted." He reached toward me and then didn't. He said, "It's not what I wanted." "I know," I said. And I meant it. That was the saddest part. I called a cab from the driveway rather than make the situation more dramatic by having them witness me arranging a ride in their kitchen. The driver was a young woman who asked no questions and played something soft on the radio. I watched the street lights of Oakville pass outside the window and tried to remember the last time I'd felt this particular kind of silence, the kind that isn't peaceful, it's just empty. The Marriott on Spears Road took me without a reservation. The room was clean and anonymous, and I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time with the lights off, looking at nothing. In the morning, I ordered coffee from the lobby and opened my laptop on the desk by the window. Habit is a remarkable thing. 38 years of showing up and doing the work means that when everything else falls apart, the work is still there. I had a financial planning document I'd been meaning to update since the spring. I opened it now. My wife and I had been deliberate people. We hadn't been flashy, we'd driven sensible cars, taken one trip a year, eaten at restaurants, without checking the prices, but without ordering the wine either. What we'd done was save, steadily, consistently, for 4 decades. My RRSP had been maxed every year since my late 30s. We'd bought rental properties, 2 townhouses in Hamilton, purchased during a slow market in 2004. When my wife passed, I'd inherited everything jointly held. I sat at that hotel desk and wrote the number at the bottom of the page, underlined it, and looked at it for a while. $2.3 million. My CPP added $3,100 a month. The rental income from Hamilton added another $2,800. I had more than enough to do almost anything I wanted. I thought about Nathan's house. I'd given them the down payment $115,000 in the spring of 2019, when they'd found the place on Glen Ashton Drive, and the market was moving faster than they could save. My daughter-in-law had hugged me. Nathan had shaken my hand with both of his and said, "Dad, we'll pay you back, every penny." I'd waved it off. Family helps family. I hadn't called it a loan. I hadn't written it down. Another mistake. I pulled up the real estate listings for Oakville. There it was. I'd noticed the sign going up the week before I'd been walking the neighborhood after dinner the way I always did, and had seen the young agent hammering it into the lawn, a semi-detached on Glen Ashton Drive. 4 houses to the left of Nathan and my daughter-in-law, on the opposite side of the street. 2 stories, older construction, a front porch that needed work but was structurally sound. I could see that from the photographs. It had been sitting for 3 weeks, which in that neighborhood meant something was wrong with the price or the basement or both. I called the listing agent at 9 in the morning. I spent 3 days at the hotel, reviewing documents, running numbers, thinking clearly in a way I hadn't been able to inside that basement room. I called my financial advisor. I called my lawyer, a woman named Patricia who'd handled my wife's estate and who I trusted completely. I told her I was considering buying a property and that I also wanted to explore a legal matter regarding a substantial amount of money I'd transferred to a family member without proper documentation. She was quiet for a moment. "Tell me more about the transfer," she said. I walked her through it. The $115,000, the verbal understanding, the lack of paperwork. The fact that I'd been helping them monthly since another $1,200 a month, set up as an automatic transfer, nominally for expenses, which had been running for 22 months. She made notes. She said, "There may be grounds for a claim as an undocumented loan, particularly given the amount, the pattern of contributions, and the documented communications around the initial transfer. It won't be simple, but it's a legitimate avenue." I said, "I'm not doing this to hurt my son. I want him to understand something." She said she understood. I viewed the property on a Thursday afternoon. The agent met me at the door, professional, organized, younger than I expected. The house had good bones. Original hardwood under the carpet in the living room. I could tell by the trim height. The basement was dry. The roof had been done 6 years ago. The kitchen was dated but functional, and the front bedroom on the second floor had a window facing directly across the street. I stood at that window and looked across at Nathan's house, at the living room window, at the driveway where my daughter-in-law's car sat, at the front door I'd walked through every Thursday for 14 months with a bottle of wine or a bag of groceries or both. The distance was perhaps 25 meters, clear sightline. On a morning with the lights on inside, you could see everything from this window. I told the agent I'd like to make an offer. She asked if I needed time to arrange financing. I told her it would be cash. Her expression didn't change, but she went very still for just a fraction of a second. Then she said, "I'll draw up the paperwork." I offered $32,000 below asking. The sellers accepted within 4 hours. The agent called me and said she'd rarely seen a cleaner transaction in this market. I closed in 11 days. I moved in on a Sunday morning with 2 carloads of belongings, a truck delivery of furniture I'd ordered, and a sense of something settling back into place in my chest. The movers brought a desk first. At my instruction, an older piece I'd kept from my office. Solid oak, nothing decorative about it. I positioned it myself in the front bedroom. I measured twice before placing it, the way I'd been trained to do. 3 feet from the window, angled left. When I sat in the chair, I was looking directly across at my son's house. I sent Nathan a text that afternoon. Moved into a new place. Close by, if you need me. I watched him read it through the window. He was standing in his kitchen. I could see him look at his phone, look up, look toward the street. He took a step toward the front window, stopped, looked back at his phone. My daughter-in-law appeared beside him. He showed her the screen. She looked up and out the front window. Found me immediately, because the light in my room was on, and I was sitting directly in front of it at a desk. Not hiding, not crouched, just sitting, working, looking up to acknowledge her when she found me. She gripped the window ledge. I raised my hand. A small wave. Civil. She stepped backward so fast she bumped into the kitchen island. Over the following days, I established a routine. Morning coffee at the desk. Review my investment portfolio. Answer emails. Do the kind of financial consulting work I'd taken up in retirement, nothing demanding. 2 or 3 small contracts with engineering firms who valued someone with my years of experience. I worked until noon. After lunch, I walked the neighborhood, introduced myself to the neighbors, learned their names, became a known presence on the street. Nothing threatening about a 64-year-old man who waves and knows what the Hendersons are naming their new puppy. Nathan called 3 times the first week. I let the calls go to voicemail. His messages got shorter each time, moving from elaborate justifications to something closer to genuine. The third one was just, "Dad, can we talk? I'll come to you." My daughter-in-law called once. I didn't recognize the number until after I'd answered it. She said she thought this behavior was childish. I told her that my lawyer would be happy to discuss my behavior and provided Patricia's contact information. Then I ended the call. The letter went out on a Tuesday. Patricia's firm handled it with the precision I expected of her formal letterhead. Clear language, a detailed accounting of the $115,000 transfer with supporting documentation, the bank transfer records, 3 emails in which Nathan had referenced paying me back, and a letter I'd written to myself at the time of the transfer which I'd had the foresight to date, sign, and scan. The letter outlined the legal basis for treating the amount as a recoverable loan under Ontario civil law and requested repayment within 30 days or a negotiated schedule, failing which a statement of claim would be filed. Patricia had advised me, clearly. The claim was legitimate, but not ironclad. Courts treat family transfers with nuance. The process would be expensive for both sides, and the outcome was not guaranteed. That, I explained to her, was rather the point. I watched them receive the letter. My son opened it in the driveway on a Wednesday afternoon, standing by the mailbox in his work clothes. He read it standing up, which told me something. He went inside. 20 minutes later, both of them appeared at the front window together, staring across the street. I was at my desk. I looked up, met their eyes, went back to my work. 2 days later, I opened my banking application and canceled the automatic transfer to Nathan's account. $1,200 a month, 22 months running, $26,400 in total, which I had also documented carefully as part of Patricia's supporting file. The screen refreshed. No scheduled transfers. I closed the laptop. What happened next unfolded at the pace that compound pressure always does, slowly, then faster. I learned the details later, from Nathan, in one of our eventual conversations, and I assembled the rest from what I observed through the window across 25 meters of quiet suburban street. The first thing they felt was the missing $1,200. My daughter-in-law managed their household finances, and she'd integrated my monthly contribution so thoroughly into their budget that she'd stopped thinking of it as help. It had become infrastructure, invisible as the electrical panel in the basement. When it disappeared, the panel went dark, and suddenly everything connected to it stopped working. Then there was the legal consultation. Nathan found a family law firm through a colleague. The initial meeting cost $800. The lawyer was honest with them. The claim was arguable but not baseless, and a proper defense would require a retainer of $15,000 to $20,000. Money they could not easily produce. Money they'd been slowly spending in the ordinary way of people who believe a safety net will always be there. Her parents were still living downstairs. 6 weeks now since that dinner. Her father had opinions about the thermostat. Her mother reorganized the kitchen pantry without asking. 2 additional people living in a house built for 2, on a budget that had just lost a significant structural column. I watched her father's car leave every morning and return mid-afternoon. He had nowhere to be, and so he occupied space. I watched the grocery runs get more complicated, 2 carts instead of 1. 2 separate preferences in produce and dairy, the arithmetic of other people's appetites. I watched Nathan come home later than usual on Fridays. I watched my daughter-in-law's shoulders get higher. She sold the SUV in early March. I came out to my porch for the morning paper and noticed a handwritten "For Sale" sign in the window of her black Hyundai Tucson, the one Nathan had told me about proudly when they'd bought it. She'd always wanted the panoramic sunroof, and this one had it. The asking price on the sign was $4,000 below what it was worth. It was gone in 72 hours. She stood in the driveway after the buyer left and didn't move for several minutes. On a Tuesday evening in late March, I watched an argument through their living room window that I didn't need to hear to understand. Her father stood up from the couch with his arms wide. Nathan said something with his hands raised, not aggressive but definitive. Her mother put her hand over her mouth. My daughter-in-law stood between them all, head moving from person to person like someone watching a match they can't stop. The following morning, her parents packed. I watched it happen from my desk over the course of 2 hours. Multiple trips to their car. Her mother and my daughter-in-law hugged on the front porch for a long time. The kind of hug that contains an argument and a forgiveness and a grief all compressed together. Her father shook Nathan's hand without warmth. They drove away north toward Barrie without looking back. My daughter-in-law stood on the porch alone for some time after that. I didn't wave. Some moments don't call for it. Nathan came across the street 3 days later. I'd been expecting him and had the coffee ready. He rang the bell. I opened the door. He'd lost weight. The kind that goes from your face first, that leaves the angles sharper and the eyes sitting differently. He came in without asking where to sit, which told me something he was past the formalities. I brought 2 cups to the table in the front room, the room with the desk at the window, and sat across from him. He looked around the room slowly, took in the desk, the positioning of it, the direct view across the street. He didn't comment. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. "Dad," he said, "I'm sorry." He looked up. "I mean it. I've been sitting with this for weeks and there's no version of it where I did the right thing. I let her push you out. You paid for that house. You helped us constantly. And I sat there and let her talk to you like you were a problem to be managed. I'm ashamed of that. I really am. I let the silence hold for a moment. In 38 years of negotiation, I'd learned that silence after an apology is not cruelty. It's respect. It gives the words room to stand on their own. I know you are, I said finally. He exhaled slowly. Is there anything? Can we work something out? I know about the letter. I know you could take us to court. Is there a way to fix this? I set my cup down. Nathan, I'm 64 years old. I have perhaps 25 years left if I'm fortunate, and maybe 15 of them where I'll be fully myself, mobile, sharp, independent. I spent my working life building something stable so that those years would be good. Your mother and I were careful people. We sacrificed a great deal to build security, and we built it for ourselves and for you, because we wanted you to have a foundation. He nodded. He was listening in the way people listen when they're not preparing what to say next. What I gave you, the down payment, the monthly transfers, all of it, I gave it freely. I never asked for receipts or repayment schedules because I believed I was investing in my family. I believed family meant something mutual. His jaw worked, and when I needed the simplest possible thing, a room to sleep in, a seat at the table, basic dignity in my son's home, the answer was to find somewhere else to be. I understand, he said quietly. I have no defense for it. The legal matter will be resolved through Patricia's office, I said. I'm not doing this to destroy you financially. But you both need to understand that actions produce consequences, and that my patience and my generosity were never infinite. I should have said that years ago instead of making it easy to take me for granted. He looked out the window, across the street at his own house. I wondered what it felt like to look at it from this angle, to see it the way I had been seeing it. What would it take, he said, to move forward? Not back to before. I understand that's gone. Forward. I need your wife to apologize. Not to you, to me. Directly, in person. Not because I require the performance of it, but because she needs to say it and mean it. And I need you both to understand that the financial support is finished, permanently. Not as punishment, as fact. You are capable adults. You can build your life on what you earn. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I'll talk to her. I'll do more than talk. I stood. The conversation had arrived at its natural end. He moved to the door. Dad. He paused with his hand on the frame. You could have come to me. You could have sat me down and told me what was happening with my marriage and given me a chance to fix it before it got to this point. Yes, I said. I could have. Why didn't you? Because I kept waiting for you to see it yourself. I looked at him directly. That was my mistake. I should have had the uncomfortable conversation years ago. I was protecting your feelings, and it cost me my dignity. He nodded once, slow and heavy. Okay, I hear that. He stepped outside, then turned. I'm going to fix this, Dad. I want you to know I mean that. Not just for the legal stuff. For us. I watched him cross the street in the early April evening. He went inside. The lights in the kitchen came on. Through the window I could see them in conversation, not the sharp angles of an argument, but the slower geometry of two people trying to find the same direction. My coffee was still warm. I sat back at the desk and opened my financial files. The Hamilton properties needed a lease renewal in July. I made a note. The larger of my RRSP accounts was due for a rebalancing conversation with my advisor. I made another note. Work, the steady and anchoring kind, had never failed to clarify my thinking. The days that followed were quieter. I finished a consulting contract with a firm in Mississauga. I repainted the front porch, which had needed it since before I moved in. Mr. Kowalski next door stopped one morning to comment on the color I'd chosen. A dark green, he said, reminded him of his parents' house in Krakow, and we ended up talking for 40 minutes about the neighborhood, about his grandchildren, about the particular pride of maintaining a property properly. I liked him immediately. 3 weeks after Nathan's visit, I was at my desk on a Thursday morning when I saw them coming across the street together. His hand was at the small of her back, not leading, steadying. She was walking with the particular stiffness of someone who has made a decision they haven't finished making. I opened the door before they rang. My daughter-in-law looked at me. She was 41 years old, and she looked tired in a way that wasn't physical. Her arms were at her sides rather than crossed, which was new. She said, "Gerald, I owe you an apology." I waited. What I did was wrong. She met my eyes. "I treated you like you were a guest who'd overstayed rather than family. You gave us everything, and I repaid you by humiliating you at your own son's dinner table. I'm sorry." The words came out even, not stumbling. She'd thought about them, possibly rehearsed them. That wasn't a criticism. Prepared sincerity is still sincerity. "I accept your apology," I said. "Please come in." They sat in the front room. I made tea rather than coffee. Nathan's stomach had been bothering him, and I'd noticed he'd been drinking less of it. Small attentions, the currency of a father. I called Patricia from the table with them present, put the call on speaker, and asked her to begin the process of withdrawing the legal claim. She confirmed the timeline. I thanked her and ended the call. "That's done," I said. "Now, I want to be clear about what happens from here." Nathan was nodding before I finished the sentence. "I'm not re-entering this as a financial resource. What you earn is what you have, and you're both more than capable of living within it. You'll find that it changes how you relate to things, to each other, to what you spend money on, to what actually matters. My wife and I lived that way our whole lives, and I wouldn't change a day of it." My daughter-in-law looked at her hands, then back at me. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you buy the house across the street? Specifically that house?" I considered the question honestly. "Because I wanted you to see that I was still here. Not gone, not warehoused, not a problem solved. Still here. Still capable. Still a person with a life worth looking at." She pressed her lips together. "I thought it was to torture us." "That was the secondary benefit," I said. Nathan made a sound that was almost a laugh. The first one I'd heard from him in months. My daughter-in-law looked up at me again. She didn't smile, but something in her face shifted the particular movement of a person who has revised an assumption they didn't know they were carrying. "We can visit," she said, not as a question. "In time," I said. "Let's see how things develop." They left together. I stood on the porch and watched them cross the street. At the door of their house, Nathan said something, and she turned to look back at me. She raised her hand, not quite a wave, something more complicated. I acknowledged it with a nod and went back inside. My coffee was cooling. I finished it anyway. That evening, I sat at the desk as the spring light dropped behind the trees on Glenashton Drive. The neighborhood settled into its evening sounds, a lawnmower 3 streets over, children calling to each other in the park at the end of the block, a dog responding to something it had decided was interesting. The ordinary music of a neighborhood that doesn't know it's being listened to. Across the street, their kitchen light came on. I could see them at the counter, both of them, standing close together, doing the small domestic work of a weeknight dinner. She handed him something. He said something back. Nothing dramatic. Nothing I needed to watch. I turned to my laptop. A former colleague had emailed about a short-term contract and infrastructure assessment for a municipality north of the city. The kind of project I could complete in my own time, on my own schedule, in an office I owned outright in a house I'd chosen for myself. I typed my response, confirming my interest. Asked about their timeline. Mentioned that I had excellent workspace available. I'd given 2 years to a family that had taken my presence for granted the way we take for granted anything that is always there. Gravity, good weather, the steadiness of ground beneath our feet. It doesn't occur to you to be grateful for the ground until the moment it shifts. Then you remember very quickly what you'd been standing on. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sure I'd been angry in the way people mean when they say the word. What I'd felt, sitting in that hotel room on the first night with the city lights of Oakville outside the window, had been colder and clearer than anger. It had been the decision of a man who finally understood that protecting himself was not a betrayal of the people he loved. It was the condition for loving them at all. The desk lamp threw a warm circle across my work. The window behind me reflected it back, a ghost of light superimposed over the quiet street outside. I reached for my pen and opened the notebook I'd been keeping since 1987. The same kind of notebook, black cover, ruled pages, replaced every 2 or 3 years as they filled and wrote down what I needed to address in the morning. Lease renewal in Hamilton, rebalancing review with the advisor, a call with the municipality. Small, concrete, manageable. The structure that a life is actually built from, one careful entry at a time. I'd spent 14 months sleeping in a borrowed room under a house I'd helped buy, trying to be grateful for the accommodation and quiet enough not to be a burden. I would not make that mistake again. I was 64 years old. I owned property on both sides of the street. I had work that interested me, neighbors who knew my name, a window that faced in the right direction, and enough years left to spend them entirely on my own terms. I closed the notebook. I finished the last of my coffee. Outside, the street was dark and ordinary and mine. If this story stayed with you, please leave a like, subscribe to Cold Vengeance, and tell me in the comments what would you have done differently. I read every comment. For the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching.